Hello everybody and welcome to my most ambitious video yet. I'm going to try and objectively rank every important character in the main Danganronpa games based on their power levels. So let me preface this by reminding everyone, this isn't a tier list of my favorite characters, this is my best attempt at an unbiased tier list about how powerful each character is. Some of my favorite characters are unfortunately very weak, but that just comes with the territory, I suppose. There will be big spoilers on all three games, so this is your warning. Now that those bozos are gone, let's get started. I guess the first thing I should go over is what I'm using as a reference point. I'm going to use this post about D&D stats from 2011, the most credible source of knowledge, of course. If you've never played Dungeons & Dragons, I'll give you a quick rundown. Your character is split into a couple different numerical stats: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Strength is your physical capabilities, dexterity is your stamina and acrobatics, constitution is how tough you are, intelligence is how smart you are, wisdom is how perceptive you are, and charisma is how good you are with people. This video is going to be long enough, so I might as well read out the stats we're going to be basing everyone on. I'm going to read what they say pretty much word for word. So, a 1 is being morbidly weak, has significant trouble lifting their own limbs. That doesn't really apply to anybody. Most of the very low numbers will not apply to anybody. So 2 to 3 is needs help to stand, can be knocked over by strong breezes. I think this might apply to Himiko, but I digress. 4 to 5 means they're knocked off balance by swinging something dense. I'm assuming like a big plank of wood or something like that. This can apply to some students as well, but I believe I gave most of the people a bit of a buff. I gave them the benefit of the doubt in most scenarios. 6 to 7 has difficulty pushing an object of their weight. This is about where the weakest students will fall. 8 to 9 has trouble even lifting heavy objects. This can apply to some students as well, but not majority, I would say. 10 to 11 can literally pull their own weight. This is where a lot of characters fall, in this range and the next one, which is 12 to 13, carries heavy objects for short distances. Now, this is where it starts to get a bit more impressive. 14 to 15 is visibly toned, throws small objects for long distances. So I know Nagito has a six-pack in his swimsuit sprite, but let's be honest, I don't think he's actually that strong. 16 and 17 is carries heavy objects with one arm. 18 and 19 is can break objects like wood with bare hands. This is where the strongest of the strong will start to fall. Anything more than this is truly exceptional. 20 to 21, able to out-wrestle a work animal or catch a falling person. 22 to 23, can pull very heavy objects at appreciable speeds. 24 to 25, the pinnacle of brawn, able to outlift several people. This is truly the peak of human evolution right here, reserved for only the strongest ultimates. However, strength isn't everything. The next stat we'll talk about is dexterity. This is more about how swift you are, including throwing objects, martial arts, acrobatics. So the lowest of the low means you're 1, barely immobile, probably significantly paralyzed. No shade to all of you paralyzed viewers out there, however, unfortunately, you're not winning any awards for dexterity in this list. Also, Monaca is not on this list, therefore nobody reaches a 1 on this power ranking. 2 to 3, incapable of moving without noticeable effort or pain. I don't have much to say about that. 4 to 5 is quite similar. Visible paralysis or physical difficulty. Still doesn't apply to any characters on this list yet. However, 6 to 7 does, being a significant klutz or very slow to react. This is where characters start to fall in. 8 to 9, somewhat slow, occasionally trips over own feet. However, most characters will fall somewhere around the 10 to 11 range, capable of usually catching a small object. 12 to 13 is also middle of the pack, able to often hit large targets. This refers to maybe throwing an item or a ball. 14 to 15 is a bit more impressive, can catch or dodge a medium speed surprise projectile. This applies to a couple. 16 to 17, able to often hit small targets. This is where it starts to get to some of the more talented characters. 18 to 19, light on feet, able to often hit small targets. Pretty impressive, but there's more. 20 to 21, graceful, able to flow from one action into another easily. Very impressive. This is about where most characters fall off. However, the scale goes higher. 22 to 23, very graceful, capable of dodging a number of thrown objects. Then last but not least, 24 to 25, moves like water, reacts to all situations with almost no effort, reserved for the most nimble of ultimates. And now we're going to move on to Constitution. Constitution starts off like an absolute child. Minimal immune system for a 1. Body reacts violently to anything foreign. 2 to 3 is frail, suffers frequent broken bones. Don't think this applies either. 4 to 5 bruises very easily, knocked out by a light punch. Possible, but we'll go ahead and be generous and assume they're better than that. 6 to 7, unusually prone to disease and infection. Maybe like a despair disease or something, maybe. 8 to 9, easily winded, incapable of a full day's hard labor. This is where it might start to apply to characters. Most of the characters will fall somewhere around here, like 10 to 11, occasionally contracts mild sicknesses. Pretty standard, I'd say. 12 to 13 can take a few hits before being knocked unconscious. Most people will probably land about here. 14 to 15, able to labor for 12 hours most days. I'm assuming this means physical labor, given the context of it being a D&D stat page, so this is pretty impressive. 16 to 17, easily shrugs off most illnesses. Black Plague, never heard of them. Next, 18 to 19, able to stay awake for days on end. If any of you psychopaths have pulled all-nighters that span multiple days, don't do that, by the way, but at the very least, you'd have a high constitution stat IRL. 20 to 21, very difficult to wear down, almost never feels fatigue, literal superhuman beings. 22 to 23, never gets sick, even of the most virulent diseases. Yet again, Black Plague, no problem. 24 to 25, tireless paragon of physical endurance, infinite source of just raw energy, I suppose. And that's as high as it goes for Constitution. So let's jump into Intelligence now. This is where it'll get interesting, because let's be honest, most characters are like 100 pounds. Most of their value comes in Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. So for Intelligence, a 1 is animalistic, no longer capable of logic or reason, like actual squirrel intelligence. 2 to 3, barely able to function, very limited speech and knowledge. 4 to 5, often resorts to charades to express thoughts. 6 to 7, often misuses and mispronounces words. 8 to 9, has trouble following trains of thought, forgets most unimportant things. This is where people will start to fall in. 10 to 11, knows what they need to get by. Will start to apply to some of the less intelligent characters. 12 to 13, knows a bit more than is necessary, fairly logical. This will be characters that kinda participate in trials. 14 to 15, able to do math or solve logic puzzles mentally with reasonable accuracy. For those that are a bit more capable of piecing together mysteries. 16 to 17, fairly intelligent, able to understand new tasks quickly. More of a higher intelligence, but still not the smartest. 18 to 19, very intelligent, may invent new processes or uses for knowledge. This is where some of the more creative characters go. 20 to 21, highly knowledgeable, probably the smartest person many people know. This is where most of the really smart people will fall. Yet there's more. 22 to 23, able to make Holmesian leaps of logic. This they're talking about Sherlock Holmes, if it wasn't obvious. I don't know who says Holmesian, but anyways, for the tippy top of the top, the cream of the crop, 24 to 25, famous as a sage and genius. I believe only one character was given this score, but the fact that one character gets that is quite impressive, to be honest. So now on to Wisdom. A 1 is seemingly incapable of thought, barely aware, referring to basically animals here. 2 to 3, rarely notices important or prominent items, people, or occurrences, kind of like a rabbit or so. 4 to 5, seemingly incapable of forethought. This is just like very impulsive people who can't reflect on their actions. 6 to 7, often fails to exert common sense. Some characters I feel could fall here, but I was a bit more generous. 8 to 9, forgets or opts not to consider options before taking action. Now this is truly impulsive people here. 10 to 11, makes reasoned decisions most of the time. This is where most characters will fall, as they're all fairly rational. 12 to 13, able to tell when a person is upset. A basic human skill, probably. 14 to 15, can get hunches about a situation that doesn't feel right. This is hard to judge since he only plays like 3 characters, but I don't remember everyone's entire dialogue, so if someone got a hunch about something and I ranked them lower than this, I apologize. 16 to 17, reads people and situations fairly well. 18 to 19, often used as a source of wisdom or decider of actions, reserved for some of the leader type characters in the games. 20 to 21, reads people and situations very well, almost unconsciously, for those real detective types. 22 to 23, can tell minute differences among many situations. Basically just the Kirigiri tier pretty much. 24 to 25, nearly prescient, able to reason far beyond logic. I don't think I gave anyone this level of wisdom ranking, but we'll just have to see. So now for charisma. Charisma was the toughest one to figure because attractiveness is very subjective. Like, for instance, I may not like Hifumi, but you may find him charming or funny. You may be a Chiaki simp, but I, the Chad Alpha Gamer, am a Toko simp. It's hard to tell, but I believe there's some level of subjectivity on what's considered charismatic and what's not. So I did my best, but this is easily the most debatable category for certain. So let's start explaining. Number 1, you are barely conscious, incredibly tactless, and non-empathetic. Literally just no emotions. 2 to 3, minimal independent thought, relies heavily on others to think instead. You can argue this applies to characters like Ganta, but there's a couple more factors for him. 4 to 5, has trouble thinking of others as people, for those sociopaths that objectify others. 6 to 7, terribly... Oh my god, what the fuck is this word? Uninteresting or rude. This is where characters may start falling in. Please don't take it personally. 8 to 9, something of a bore or makes people mildly uncomfortable. Hard to call any of the characters boring, to be honest. 10 to 11, capable of polite conversation. I'd say this is applicable to most characters. 12 to 13, mildly interesting, knows what to say to the right people, probably the most applicable to the characters. 14 to 15, interesting, knows what to say to most people. 16 to 17, popular, receives greetings and conversations on the street. There aren't really any streets to be receiving greetings on, to be honest. 18 to 19, immediately likable by many people, subject to favorable talk, for those characters that many gravitate towards, I'd say. 20 to 21, life of the party, able to keep people entertained for hours. Not too many party animals in the games, but we'll figure this out. 22 to 23, immediately likable by almost everybody, reserved for those very cool dudes. 24 to 25, renowned for wit, personality, and or looks. So that's the cream of the crop, the best of the best right there. So here we go, time to find out who our unlucky bottom tier character is. We've covered what every ranking is for each category, so we've got a lot to go through. And I might try and blaze through it here and there because this video is already going to be pretty long. Also, I'm going to be honest, it's been a little while since I played the games, so bear with me if I underrate your favorite characters or forget a few obscure scenes or comments. However, I'm quite happy with this tier list, and it's been a long time coming. Sorry if your favorite character gets put down on the bottom, but just because they're weak in power doesn't mean they can't capture our hearts. Without further ado, that was really corny. Let's jump right into our unlucky 50th ranked character. Introducing Teru Teru. My guy Teru Teru boasts an average strength, maybe slightly below. Able to often hit large targets, Well, he does check that box. He's about average toughness, not the most physically fit, but that's okay. Slightly above average intelligence. Perhaps I'm not giving him enough credit for the intelligence it'd take to be a cook. However, we never get to see much of that in the game. He's fairly reasonable outside of the whole committing murder bit. As for charisma, that's his weakest stat. He's fairly perverted and lets his temper out at the end of Trial 1. Taro is a very average character as far as stats go, which, when matched with characters with ultimates, his doesn't offer him much of an advantage as far as I can tell. So next we have Himiko in number 49. By no means does this mean she's a bad character, but she is very weak and vulnerable. Physically, she's very small and frail. She's kind of slow outside of her magic trick in Chapter 2. She's always very tired and lazy. Mentally, she's fairly competent, but she does not compensate for her lack of physical strength with mental strength, and she boasts a very average mental strength. And she is one of the more charismatic characters in the series, however not enough to keep her out of the bottom section of this list, unfortunately. Following Himiko is Saionji. Saionji suffers from a lot of the same problems as Himiko. She's a little more physically capable and good at reading people, but her low charisma keeps her from being on the lower middle power rankings. Honestly, I don't have a whole lot to say about her, so we're gonna go on to number 47. Up next, she's a similar case to the last one, Mikan as number 47. She's mediocre in strength, but has the lowest dexterity score of all characters considering how obviously clumsy she is. For her constitution, I guess you could say she occasionally contracts mild sicknesses. She's fairly intelligent within her field and understands situations reasonably. However, she is not very good at socializing and is very timid, giving her a below average charisma stat. Which is a good segue into number 46, which is the genius inventor Miyu Iruma. It feels like a crime to put her this low. Her physical stats aren't all too impressive. She's slightly below average in toughness considering how shameless and degenerate she can be sometimes. So despite having the highest intelligence stat, her crude and decent charisma stat puts her low. I considered weighting physical appearance to charisma, but opted that while there's some consistency in what is considered attractive, it's just too subjective for what I was going for in this list. So unfortunately that may leave both Himiko and Miyu underrated. The next character partly explains why there's 50 characters in this list. I decided Toko Fukawa to be number 45 for a few reasons. Firstly, this doesn't take into consideration her genocider Sho/Jill personality. For the sake of this list, I separated them into their own characters. Toko is a pretty frail girl, passing out in the middle of class trials and being generally weak. She's obviously quite intelligent and understanding, capable of reading people as well, but comes off incredibly rude and gross to people. Number 44 is Hifumi. This probably doesn't come as much of a surprise to anyone that he's down in the lower rankings. However, he does have some redeeming qualities. For one, his strength is above average. His dexterity is lacking, however Hifumi is a walking tank. He takes that hammer like a champ right before having an extremely anime death as he gives a hint in his final words. He's above average intelligence and average wisdom with low charisma. Perhaps he should have lower charisma than I gave him, as I was quite harsh on Miyu, Mikan, and Saionji, however it's still below average. Our next entry is Yasuhiro at number 43. Also probably expected to be in the low rankings. He's not particularly strong or tough. His physical stats are very average. His intelligence is the lowest out of every character ranked. His strong suit is his wisdom. He's quite good at reading people, as expected of the ultimate clairvoyant. On top of that, he's fairly friendly and easygoing, so his charisma is above average too. Tied with his total stat number, Genocide Sho, or Jill, is number 42. The reason I put Genocide Sho over Yasuhiro despite both of them being survivors, and even though she isn't always present, when she is very physically capable. And let's be honest, who would you be more scared of? Yasuhiro or Genocide Jack or Jill or Sho or whatever? So she's average strength, but she's incredibly agile, capable of throwing knives with precision. She's probably a little tougher than Toko is, and a little less intelligent in this manner. She's also not as calm and observant as Toko is, but they're almost equal in charisma, both sporting a low charisma stat. Genocide Joe having a little lower because of how easily she scares people away and her inappropriate comments. So securing the number 41 spot is Mahiro. At this point, most of these characters do not have many negative traits to them, and we're going to start dealing with the best of the best. However, Mahiro is very average physically, and as far as intellect or wisdom, she doesn't get much of an opportunity to showcase any that she may have. Her main contribution to Trial 1 was her pictures, which doesn't say much of her as a character. However, her personality is a little polarizing, so she has a very slightly below average charisma, despite some people possibly finding that charming. Moving on to number 40, we have Shuichi. Shuichi starts off fairly weak, but throughout the course of the game he gets a little more capable. His strong suit, however, is his ability to piece together info and read people's testimonies and blast them with his mind bullets. As for his charisma, he's fairly timid, so he only has an average score for that. Next on the list is Tugami. If you haven't left yet because you're like, oh, I don't care about spoilers, this is like absolutely like the last cutoff, like he's the ultimate imposter if you didn't already know that. He takes a number 39 spot with similar stats as Shuichi. His strength is a little bit above average, his dexterity is pretty decent, he got under that table pretty fast, you know. His constitution average, he didn't really survive the stab wounds. He was definitely intelligent and observant. He is well prepared for the situation and a bit of a leader for the group until his inevitable demise. Moving into the 38s, we have Naegi. Naigi's a fairly average boy in every sense. He's kind of weak and capable of doing a bit of running and falling down a giant garbage chute, but he did survive that. His strongest skills being his mental skills for sure, and with an average charisma, there's not a whole lot to say about him. He's very middle of the pack, and that's kind of what his whole character is about, I'd say. Here at number 37, we have our first tough guy, Mondo. Mondo sports above average strength, dexterity, and constitution. He's not the smartest, wisest, or most charismatic, but in the end you can't help but love the guy. He may be a bit crass, a bit impulsive, a bit harsh, but he did feel regret for his actions, and it takes a strong man to do that. So number 36 is going to be a speed round. We have Angie, mediocre in all aspects but wisdom and charisma. She's used as a source of wisdom at times and is charismatic enough to form her own cult, so there you go, 36. Number V3 girl at number 35 is Sumugi. She's a plain girl, not particularly strong or tough. Credit where credit is due, she must be quite intelligent and manipulative to be the mastermind of the game. On top of that, her charisma is just a little bit above average. The next V3 girl on the chopping block is Kaede. At number 34, she's not strong, tough, or any of those things. However, she is decently smart and observant. She is capable of setting up her murder plan right in front of Shuichi. Her greatest strength for sure is her charisma. She's very kind and sweet, so much so that nobody wanted to admit and vote her as the murderer. So number 33 is the underappreciated Leon. He's quite strong considering he's able to overcome an ambush by Sayaka. He certainly would have a great dexterity stat, being a baseball pro, and he's able to throw Yasuhiro's glass ball at the small target that he needed to, so he must be quite accurate. Also, he deserves credit for how many hits he could take, like, that's pretty impressive. He's not particularly smart, wise, or charismatic, but he makes up for those average stats with his physical stats. In the number 32 spot, we have Ibuki. Not known for her strength, but rather her dexterity and endurance. She's capable of jamming out for a while. This makes up for a lack of intelligence and general ditziness. However, these traits aren't purely negative and result in a very positive, wholesome, loving girl with lots of charisma. To continue our streak with Danganronpa 2 girls, number 31 is Sonia. She's not strong, she doesn't have a lot of endurance, and she's not tough. She's not even really that smart, but where Sonia really pops off is her wisdom, since she is the princess of an entire kingdom. However, she doesn't only have wisdom, she also boasts the highest charisma stat out of all the characters due to her nature of being kind and innocent. She also has her own personal love triangle, so she must be pretty popular. However, if you thought Sonya was good, think about Sayaka at number 30. Where Sonya lacks in physical ability, Sayaka makes up for. She doesn't have as similar of stats as you might have thought, but being a pop idol, she has more stamina than Sonya, as well as higher constitution, as she was able to fight Leon for a little while before being defeated. She has slightly higher intelligence for coming up with such a sneaky plan, but not as much wisdom. Not only does she have all that, but she ties Sonya for having the highest charisma stat. The next character we have today is Chihiro in the number 29 slot. He's very weak and a tie for the lowest strength stat in this list. His dexterity isn't noteworthy, his constitution quite low. Luckily, he makes up for these shortcomings by being incredibly intelligent, with the highest intelligence stat in this entire list. He's also pretty strong in the wisdom stat, and is above average in charisma. So Chihiro is a very min-max character. And to finally break up the streak of girls, we have the boy Kaito at number 28. He's pretty strong. He doesn't quite have the dexterity, the stamina, however he is a tough cookie. He won't let you know that he's totally exhausted and he'll just keep pushing on. It might not be intelligent or particularly wise to do so, but it really gives him a lot of charm and personality. It really gives you a good idea of how dedicated of a friend he is, that he's ride or die, or I guess both. Speaking of Kaito's ride or die, right beside him is Maki at number 27. Maki is strong. You can see she's physically fit in your events with Kaito and Maki. Her strong suit is definitely her endurance. She can do those push-ups all day long. She's probably not as tough as Kaito, however, she's certainly not weak either. She's not dumb, but gets outshined by a lot of other highly intelligent people. She's fairly calm and rational, but also clouded by negativity. In addition, her personality can tend to make people around her uncomfortable, as she's not very friendly. This next one is kinda tough. You may have heard of her, the 16th student, Mukuro Ikusaba, hiding somewhere in the school, at number 26. She's pretty quiet, and she dies really fast in the first game, and I'm not all that in touch with the anime or the mangas that she does appear in. She's undeniably strong though, fast and tough, as expected of the ultimate soldier, but she's not particularly intelligent or good at reading people. By far her weakest trait is how passive and uncharismatic she is. In the case of the community, this plays to her popularity, but in the world of the series, it's not to her favor and could lead to her downfall. It hurts to do this to my boy putting him this low in the list, but number 25 is Gundam. Gundam is a case of not being extremely proficient in any one stat, but being above average in all of them. Strong enough to kill a robot, smart enough to figure out the mystery of the funhouse, wise enough to sacrifice himself, all while being humble and keeping up his somewhat popular persona of being a dark edgelord. With a tie in total stat number, I felt like I had to put Soda at number 24. The deciding factor was that Soda had survived while Gundam didn't. Soda is similar to Gundam in stats, however I think Soda is a little tougher due to his talent. His hands are probably hella calloused. He's definitely a bit smarter than Gundam, but not quite charismatic enough to get the girl. Possibly placed too high on this list is Rantaro at number 23. Rantaro doesn't get much an opportunity to prove himself, so I presume his stats to be physically about average. He has some bit of intelligence to become the ultimate survivor, but not enough to be able to survive long into the game. He definitely seems quite observant and would be a good decision maker. On top of that, he puts off a very friendly aura, landing him a pretty decent charisma stat. Our next entry is the ultimate affluent prodigy, Mr. Byakuya Togami, at number 22. Togami doesn't have too many weaknesses. He's got an average strength stat. Perhaps he might be more deserving of a higher strength stat considering what he did to Chihiro, but I digress. His dexterity and constitution are not noteworthy, but his intelligence is higher than most. His true strength is his wisdom and influence. On top of it all, he may be a bit rude, but I figured he would have an above average charisma stat. If he didn't, he wouldn't be able to make Naegi tell him everything. Coming up next is Akane Iwari at number 21. I personally don't care for Akane, however, her strength is undeniable. She can go head to head with Nekomaru and battle for a long time, which proves her dexterity. In addition, she has a respectable constitution stat as she's quite tough. Her intelligence and wisdom are definitely lacking compared to her peers. And to top it off, she's got a pretty decent charisma stat to secure her place at number 21. The final protagonist in this list sits at number 20. Hajime is relatively strong, able to hold Akane up on his shoulders in Chapter 2. His dexterity is above average. He runs from island to island. He's a little above average in constitution due to his time in the funhouse. He's more intelligent than most of his peers, carrying a lot of dead weight through some of those trials. He's able to convince people multiple times to see the truth, proving his wisdom stat to be above average, all alongside a solid charisma stat. He's basically just a slightly stronger Tagami. So number 19 on the list is Ishimaru. He ended up higher on this list than I expected. He's shown average strength and dexterity, but his constitution is unusually high as shown from the sauna scene alongside Mondo. In addition, his intelligence is fairly high. His wisdom is the highest of his stats considering he is a rational person and helps the group make decisions, such as originally coming up with the idea to meet in the cafeteria, which would be a staple for all of the games following. Unfortunately, he's not really charismatic, but he's not disliked either. Number 18 is Korekio. He's fairly strong and graceful. I'm assuming that Cage is pretty heavy. He's slightly above average in dexterity and constitution considering how he survived in his execution for as long as he did. He's definitely knowledgeable, so much so that it becomes creepy. He's also pretty good at observing people and their motivations. Unfortunately, he's not all that charismatic and makes people kind of uncomfortable at times. So this was a tough placement for me to make, putting Tenko at number 17. Tenko is definitely one of the strongest members of the V3 roster and the series. She's more of a fluid fighter, therefore she's tied for the highest dexterity stat. She doesn't really get an opportunity to display any toughness, but I can presume she's at least a bit above average in that department. Unfortunately, she lacks much intelligence and isn't the wisest character as she's quite impulsive. She would either end up near Sumugi's placement if I decided to use how she treated men, but I decided to showcase Tenko at her best. Some people might not like me for putting her this low on the tier list, but number 16 is Chiaki. Her strength isn't great, but she definitely doesn't have the dexterity, as she's always tired. However, I remembered how in the Danganronpa 3 anime, she limped all the way through the death maze with multiple cuts and holes in her body like an absolute tank, so her constitution is nothing to scoff at. Her intelligence is the highest of the Danganronpa 2 cast, her wisdom fairly above average, as well as her charisma. Perhaps her charisma could be higher with her being the head of her class in the anime, but she doesn't quite have the orbiter influence like Sonya does. Finding her way into the number 15 spot, it's Atsuhina. She doesn't showcase a whole lot of physical strength outside of carrying Naigi in the Danganronpa 3 anime, however her talent gives her plenty of dexterity. She's a very energetic girl. She's definitely not weak either, with an above average constitution. She's not the smartest tool in the shed, but she's a good judge of character, and usually pretty calm. Usually. To wrap it all up, she's genuinely very caring and loving, therefore she's got a great charisma stat. Don't crucify me for this placement, but number 14 is Kokichi. By himself, Kokichi isn't very physically strong. He has both an average dexterity and constitution stat. His intelligence is where he shines, considering he comes up with the ideas for the electro hammers and his insane murder plot. Time and time again, he proves his insane intelligence. He also holds a high wisdom stat, considering how well he is able to push everyone's buttons. He's a bit of an asshole, so his charisma is only slightly above average. Right beside Kokichi, it has to be Nagito at number 13. He's not all too strong or dexterous, but after that he begins to shine. His pain tolerance is impressive to say the least. He's not quite as intelligent as Kokichi, but he's definitely up there with his insane plot to reveal the traitor and kill everyone. He's pretty good at reading and influencing people, even if they don't want to listen to him. He's capable of being quite charismatic as shown in the beginning of the game, so that puts him at number 13. Right beside our favorite liar is our second favorite liar, Celeste, as number 12. She's average in all physical stats, perhaps with some extra points considering she was burning alive until hit by a truck. Her intelligence is comparable to Togami, but her wisdom is her character's bread and butter. She's an expert at reading people. She wouldn't be the ultimate gambler if she wasn't, you know? On top of that, I think she's quite charismatic, being able to put on a front for so long through the store before she eventually snaps. Coming up next is a girl who probably couldn't even lie if she tried. It's Peko at number 11. Not only is she strong, but she's incredibly agile, with one of the highest dexterity stats across all the characters, as displayed in her execution. In addition, she's a tough girl, having to fight as a gangsta. She's slightly above average intelligence, and a good judge of character, however, she's not very charismatic. Coming in hot is Kyoko Kirigiri into number 10. Number 10 on the list, but number 1 in our hearts. She doesn't show much physical strength. In fact, I've never seen her pick anything up at all, except for a cup of ramen on her head. She's average in dexterity and constitution. She's tied for the highest intelligence among her peers. On top of that, she has the highest wisdom out of everyone on the list. She's known for being very observant after all. She doesn't have a whole lot of charisma, so that's that. Possibly a surprising pick for number 9 is Kibo. Kibo is one of the strongest people in the Danganronpa roster thanks to his robo powers. He could potentially fly around endlessly as well. He just breaks shit and does a lot of damage at the end of the game. However, he's not very intelligent, and he's kinda clueless, and kind of a brick wall when it comes to personality since he takes everything so literally. Number 8 is Kuzuryu. He's definitely a bit above average in strength and dexterity. However, surprisingly, he's quite tough after stabbing himself in the chest to atone for his sins. He's fairly intelligent to survive a killing game, but he's not a genius. He's kind of impulsive and not the most trustworthy, but he's likely a good judge of character, so he's not much higher than average in that department. Throughout the course of the game, I think he becomes a very respectable person, even deciding not to sacrifice everyone for his own personal gain when faced with a dilemma. Number 7 is Ryoma. I feel Ryoma is underrated, but he's definitely not underpowered. Since I'm choosing to believe all the lies in V3, Ryoma is capable of killing an entire mafia with just his tennis skills, so he's definitely strong. He's also quite quick and nimble, as expected of an ultimate tennis pro. He's fairly tough to have been killed in such a manner and still put up a struggle. He's fairly average in intelligence and wisdom. He's not incapable of wisdom, but he doesn't quite show much of it. As far as charisma, he's a bit of a downer, so he's slightly below average. Here in the number 6 slot, we have Gonta. Gonta has the greatest showcase of strength in the series in my opinion. He's able to easily lift up a manhole cover like it's nothing. He does not show too much dexterity throughout the game, but it's safe to assume he's got a little bit of that. He has more than a little bit of constitution, considering he was stung by countless bees and wasps in his execution before getting speared to death in the end. He's a little bit dumb, not the wisest, but he's fairly likable despite that. He's not the best at explaining himself or a smooth talker, but he's still a gentleman. A possibly surprising placement on this list for me is Nekomaru at number 5. He's evenly matched in strength and dexterity with Akane. However, where he really shows up is in constitution with the highest constitution on this list. My man got exploded protecting the person he cared about and was able to come back from that rebuilt as a cyborg. On top of that, he got beaten to hell and back in chapter 4 before he died. It's quite common for him to not be the smartest or the most charming, but he's still stacked in physical power, and he's a pretty solid judge of character. He's a man that many could follow into battle, so he deserves a spot this high up on the list. It was a matter of time before she showed up. The Queen of Despair, Junko, at number 4. She's got a little bit of strength, a little bit of swiftness, a little bit of toughness. However, she's truly stacked elsewhere. She's undeniably intelligent, enough to spiral the entire world into chaos. People look to her for advice and orders. She's a girl boss, I suppose. On top of that, she's lovable, incredibly popular among her peers despite her twisted desires. People love her anyway, and they worship her. I wasn't sure if I should put Monokuma on this list, but I say he's right next to Junko, which is where he belongs really. He's not the strongest, but he's full of energy, never tiring out, probably because he's a robot. He's not weak nor tough, although he is definitely smart. As a side effect of being controlled by Junko, he's smart enough to facilitate a killing game for his own entertainment. He's a decision maker, forcing the students to do whatever he pleases, and ruling with an iron fist in the school. On top of that, he's full of witty one-liners that make him fairly popular and iconic as the game's mascot. Perhaps in the eyes of the characters, he He's not so funny and charming, but his ironic sense of humor is quite pleasing. So number 2 on this list, we have the Prime Minister of Japan, Kurumi. She's capable of completing any task given to her, therefore she's trained to kill, making her quite strong. She's got the stamina to complete whatever is asked of her. She has an impressive pain tolerance, as shown in her execution. She's smart enough to be the head of Japan, and came up with an intricate murder plan. However, she's got the highest wisdom in the entire series. She's very much a leader, a judge of character, incredibly loyal and honest. She's quite lovable. People don't want to see her go, as she's calm and sweet and genuinely cared for the people during her time in the school. So now we have the big number 1. I feel like it was expected for her to be definitely up there, but she's number 1. It has to be the best girl, Sakura. She's impressively strong, able to rival Gonta's strength. She's tough and very fluid with her movements, able to fight Monokuma, and most likely being able to defeat any opponent she was faced with in one-on-one combat. Nobody comes close to her fighting capabilities. She may not be the most intelligent or wise, but she's not lacking in that department either. She's very calm, rational, and capable of making smart decisions. On top of that, she's a nice girl, kind to her peers, capable of becoming good friends with Asahina in the midst of this killing game. So I think she's very much worthy of the number 1 slot. So that about wraps things up. Thank you for watching my best attempt at a subjective tier list. Keep in mind, this list is meant to be subjective. I'm sorry if your favorites didn't get placed higher, because I know mine weren't. I'm sure some stats could be shifted around and some placements could be adjusted, but I can live with this list. Up on the screen, I'll show some numbers and averages for everyone to compare. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you don't subscribe. A comment would be cool. I read them all. I've got some links in the description if you want to check some other stuff out. This channel is purely Danganronpa content, at least at the moment. I've been uploading daily videos of attempting the Death Road of Despair V3 minigame, which might entertain you, so if you want to check those out, that'd be dope. Otherwise, thank you all for watching, so I'll see ya.